Welcome back to Spoiler Free Wrestling, everyone. And it is Saturday, March 28th, and here is everything that is going on in the world of pro wrestling. I want to start it off with Brodie Lee, who has now been in AEW for 2 weeks. He was announced as the leader of the Dark Order 2 weeks ago on the first show that AEW started to do in front of no fans in attendance at Daly's Place in Jacksonville. And it was a very interesting way that AEW announced him as the leader of the Dark Order. Now, leading up to the revelation that Brodie Lee is the Exalted One, the members of the Dark Order and AEW and even the Dirt Sheets did everything that they possibly could to make fans believe that Matt Hardy was going to be the leader of this faction. And this started, I would say, maybe this was a couple of months ago. Maybe it was less than a couple of months ago. But there was almost a throwaway line in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and this is Dave Meltzer's publication, which sounded really out of place. And the line was that Matt Hardy is currently the leading speculated name to be the leader of the Dark Order, or something along those lines. That's not a direct quote. But the word speculated was definitely in there. And it sort of caught me by surprise because I don't know if the word speculated has ever appeared in the Wrestling Observer newsletter before. It's always, this is what's happening. This is the case. This is fact. So that the word speculated got thrown in there, it seemed out of place to me. And it sort of led me to a theory that I have now about how AEW pulled this sort of swerve almost on fans. So this throwaway line gets printed in the Observer, and it then gets reprinted from every dirt sheet that there is. Repeated this idea that it was mentioned in the Wrestling Observer newsletter that Matt Hardy is the speculated name to be the leader of the Dark Order. And then Evil Uno put out all of these tweets that sort of insinuated that Matt Hardy was the leader of the Dark Order. There was even shots of him doing the delete sign while he was in the ring representing the Dark Order. But now we know that this was all done just to throw fans in the wrong direction, so that when the leader of the Dark Order was unveiled, it was more of a surprise. So they managed to do 2 debuts on the same show. Both Brodie Lee debuted and Matt Hardy debuted. And so this is happening right after everyone knows Matt Hardy is free to appear on AEW television. They announced that the leader of the Dark Order was going to be unveiled. So everybody who thinks they know what's going on backstage in pro wrestling, and by the way, nobody really knows what goes on backstage in pro wrestling, not even wrestlers. There's so much secrecy and I guess what I can call mistruths. Are those lies? I think mistruths are lies. There's a lot of working that goes on behind the camera as there is in front of the camera. But anyway, all the people that felt they knew exactly what was going to happen on this show, well, it turns out they didn't know what was going to happen. And so even those fans who think they're going to know everything before it happens, AEW even fooled them. They thought Matt Hardy was the Exalted One. And then Brodie Lee came out as the Exalted One. And all of a sudden, that surprise that you think you can never get in wrestling these days, at least with the hardcore or quote-unquote insider fans, they were able to get that surprise reaction for them too. I thought it was a really interesting way that they did it. So what exactly did they do? Did they feed this information to the Wrestling Observer incorrectly in order to get him to print it so that this would take off and this news story would be a thing. I would say, and this is just me speculating based on the word speculation appearing in the Wrestling Observer, that AEW let Dave Meltzer know that, like maybe Dave Meltzer was sort of in on the swerve a little bit. And that's why he printed it, but he included the word speculated, which is something you're not going to see in many other reports in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. So very interesting way that AEW kind of swerved fans on who the Exalted One was. Then a few segments after Brodie Lee is revealed as the Exalted One, Matt Hardy is then revealed as a member of the Elite's team for the Blood and Guts match, which is now being postponed until after the world gets back together. So very interesting. Brodie Lee then appeared on Chris Jericho's podcast this week. He gave a very revealing discussion about his time in WWE. It's definitely something that I think fans should check out, and we'll include a link to it in the notes for this video. Then there was a vignette or video showed on AEW Dynamite this week that showed Brodie Lee sitting at a dining table with Alex Reynolds and John Silver, the two, I guess, lowly ranked members of the Dark Order on the AEW roster. And so you see Brodie Lee's cutting up his steak, and the other two are sitting in front of their meals. And one person I can't remember which one. One of them goes to start his meal, and Lee gets up and is like, "Oh no, you don't eat until I'm done. Until I'm done eating, you can't eat." And he talked about this a little bit on the Chris Jericho podcast, where some of these could be seen as shots at Vince McMahon a little bit. He mentioned on the podcast with Chris Jericho that when pitching ideas to Vince McMahon, when Vince has eaten, plays a role in how well your pitch goes. And then the scene continues. The other member of the Dark Order sneezes. Brodie Lee can't have this, and he chases him out of the scene. And this, some have seen as a bit of a shot at Vince McMahon, I guess, has this thing where he hates sneezes. He hates when he sneezes, and he hates when other people sneeze. So, I mean, were these shots at Vince McMahon? Probably a little bit. There is the idea that the head dog in the pack always eats first and nobody else in the pack eats until the alpha has finished. So there is a little bit there about Brodie Lee really making himself solidified as the alpha in the Dark Order. And also, just to get people to not like him very much. I think fans might be inclined to cheer for him a little bit just because they'd been rooting for him to do more in WWE for so long, and these vignettes kind of helping get people hating Brodie Lee a little bit. So, and in another vignette, he was targeting Chris Daniels, who it looks like he's going to be going into a match with. And Chris Daniels had been telling people that there is no Exalted One to the Dark Order, and that it was all just a con or a sham that the Dark Order was pulling. And Brodie Lee in this vignette said to Christopher Daniels, "You're not the first old man to not believe in me, but I'll make sure that you're the last." And of course that was a bit of a shot at Vince McMahon. And Brodie goes into great detail about his relationship with Vince McMahon on the podcast with Chris Jericho. It's definitely an interesting listen. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see what Brodie Lee does now moving forward in AEW as the Exalted One and leader of the Dark Order. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more news or reports from Spoiler Free Wrestling.